particular institutions in terms of governance are wanting, in the sense that it has been used to advance the divergence from the principles of the public finance, the principles of the Constitution of the land of Kenya, where the Constitution is looking at the use of every resource that is available to bring Kenyans together, to advance cohesion among the Kenyans, and to ensure equity is administered to all the Republic of Kenya. I want to support that as this Honorable House, we need to scrutinize this report very candidly and be able to take recommendations from the Auditor General as it is, so that we're able to restore back the discipline, the confidence in the public institutions for the Kenyans. We that we have been entrusted by the same citizens to carry out or to oversight the application of the law equitably should also rise to a mandate and ensure we address specifically and areas which have been mentioned, so that we bring back, we inculcate back to the minds of those few people who have been chosen to run the institutions, so that they run them in accordance with the law and ensure that Kenyans receive their desired service, Kenyans are able to be served equally, so that we are able to bring out a nation that from all corners of the country, they feel the importance of being Kenyans. Otherwise, as it is, and the way the report has put up, especially on matters of recruitment, where you find one public institutions, employees from one community. This is the reason as to why Kenyans at times are not together, because they find, they don't find the reason as to why. When an investment has been put in a place, it favors specific people from that area. So, Mr. Speaker, from this Honorable House, I stand to support this and say, gone are those times. Let us utilize the Constitution, apply the Constitution of the land to the ladder, so that Kenyans in every place, in every corner, they feel they are part of this country and that they are considered in every little resource it is available. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, we need to enhance the reports from these institutions. At times like this, a challenge that we are receiving is where now the reports of 2-3 years ago are being discussed at the latter now, at this time and moment, when even the applicability has changed. We need to enhance the timely reports given to the Auditor General, and those reports being submitted to this House, being discussed, so that recommendation can be applied now. Because you may realize times have changed, situations have changed. Even if we are looking at an issue, it is now historical, and applicability now may not be that of importance. But I want to call upon that such good reports be brought on time, we discuss as the House, and we move out of this House even through committee and ensure that these things are happening in place. And should ever be somebody or somewhere who is failing to carry on this responsibility, I also want to call upon that in terms of regulations, we improve our recommendations in regulations or in law, so that whosoever given an opportunity to serve in trust, let him serve with uttermost good faith. Anybody knowingly or by negligently abusing his office or power, action should be taken accordingly, so that Kenyans will be able to learn that when you are given an opportunity, use every coin to the latter, use it to the purpose, and ensure you bring out the basic principles of the Constitution, that you are bringing Kenyans together and you are advancing equity and proper use of public resources. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Owen Bayer.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I want to first congratulate the committee and the chairperson for ensuring that we have a report, the first report of this committee on time. I want to sincerely thank the committee for a good job, well done. Honorable Speaker, it is also very important that oversight committees, especially that deal with reports of the Auditor General, present those reports in this House on time. Because audited reports go a long way to ensure that when we are doing the budgeting, especially for county governments, the amount of money given to county governments depend on audited reports. And therefore, the chairperson and your committee, I want to thank you, because what you have done goes a long way to ensure whether county governments get more money in the next budget cycle or not. So I want to urge all committees and to urge our leader of minority, because a lot of these committees are chaired by the minority side, that you hasten such that we have these audited reports and the reports come to this parliament, so that in the next budget cycle we are able to give counties money. It's a very important thing. So I want to thank this committee, but I also want to urge you request the other committees that are oversight to bring their reports on time to this House. Secondly, Honorable Speaker, looking at this report, which is basically on education institutions, I want to first thank the committee for flagging out important issues, because it is on record, Honorable Speaker, that a lot of our educational institutions are not very well managed. And it is very important that you flag out these issues so that we can improve. The Presidential Working Party on Education and the report that was tabled actually said a lot of the things that this report has. And this Presidential Working Party report, which was chaired by Professor Munavu, is in a way trying to change the way education is managed. And I think it is in the same spirit that this committee has made its recommendation. So I think there is a dovetailing of ideas, and this is good for the country. But I want to mention specific things. Honorable Speaker, as government, we cannot take the flaks on CEOs whom we have given jobs who are not managing them well. If you are an accounting officer, do your job. And the job is to follow the Constitution, follow the statute, follow the law that is there, and ensure that you manage our educational institutions very well. And that is something that we agree with the minority, that public institutions must be managed well. So there is no excuse for any CEO who has been given mandate to run an organization to say he does not know or understand accounting procedures. That we will not take from any CEO in this country. So if you are there and your management team has actually noticed that some CEOs do not want to submit documents, and therefore they run away from audit. Every CEO in this country, if you're managing an education institution, you must submit. Every CEO in this country, if you're managing an education institution, you must submit yourself to audit, because you are handling government funds, and because you're handling government funds, you must be audited and be accountable to the public. And therefore, this committee do not ever take an excuse of someone not submitting to audit because of late submission of documents. That CEO must be censured, and we are ready as government to censure such a CEO. We do not want CEOs who will not submit themselves to audit. Honorable Speaker, another finding which I find interesting is that still, institutions who are putting up huge buildings in land which has no titles, and yet that is a government institution. If you are a government institution, the law is very clear. You must invest on land which belongs to government. Where are they investing on land which does not have a title deed? Such a CEO is not doing this government justice. Supposing someone comes and claims that land and a government building has to be brought down, that CEO must take responsibility for such a thing. So I would like to ask you as chairperson, as you make these recommendations, I agree with you that CEOs of educational institutions must henceforth comply with Section 68 of the PFM Act, ensure that we have all government documentation. Institutions which do not have title deed to lands must ensure that they get titles to that land. Honorable Speaker, an interesting observation here, that a government institution has been constructing a building for 37 years. 37 years, they are constructing one building. Either we do not have a CEO who is dependable or reliable, or actually this CEO does not know his work. How do you construct a building for 37 years? And what they do is they always vary costs every year. And probably they are doing that, they're delaying the completion of that building for their own purpose. Honorable Speaker, I have looked at the recommendations from the committee, and I think this is a very lenient recommendation. You should have been more drastic about that, because the costs keep on going up, Initial cost was probably 5 million, now probably it is 100 million, just because someone does not want to complete that building. We want to say as government, if you be given a job, you start a project, it must be completed on time so that you save taxpayers pain. Honorable Speaker, I want to speak on the last one. Expensive consultancies. You know, some of the universities that we have personnel who actually can provide consultancy at a reasonable fee. They are professors, they are engineers, they are doctors. They are people who have knowledge within a university. But the vice chancellor or the CEO of that organization will go out there and look for his friends and procure a consultancy at a very exorbitant cost, just because they want to corrupt the system. But I want us, as government, our aim is to reduce cost of construction, to reduce expenditure. And I want to ask CEOs who are there, and I want this report index them. We do not want expensive consultancies for the sake of just having consultancies. Honorable Speaker, I want to finally say that skewed ethnic diversity within institutions is across board in many of our parastatals, in many of our organizations. And I want to urge those that have been given the mandate to ensure that we project the face of Kenya in employment so that the institutions do not reflect ethnicity of where they come from. A university, NEC, National Council for Science, the TVETs, they should reflect the face of Kenya. And therefore, Honorable Speaker, I want to agree with this report, and I want to thank the committee for a good job well done, and I want to thank you for fast-tracking the many years of the reports that you have done, and on time bring this report. I thank the committee, and I wish that they continue with a good job to audit and hold government account. We ask that we be held to account as a government. And I want to ask the minority, that is your job, that is your role. Do your job. Stop going to the streets. Criticize us here in the House, and we'll appreciate that job, and we'll move this country forward. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Member for Kamukunji.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity. I want to commend and thank the chairman for the report. And indeed, it's a very ugly and a disturbing report on the status of our national organizations. And I think this is an important moment for Parliament to make sure that the recommendation of this particular report is implemented, and we follow up and support the recommendations of this particular report, because this is a widespread problem in many of our national organizations. There is impunity, there is an abuse of power, there is mismanagement, there is enormous looting and theft of public resources. There's a lot of wastage in many of these government departments, and sometimes you wonder how this country can continue like that. Sometimes you're amazed by the resilience of this particular country in the light of this kind of impunity that gets away without punishment. And many of these officials know that they can walk away tomorrow and go back to their homes without paying the penalty of mismanagement and corruption. And that's why when you go around, you see a lot of institutions that are falling apart. You would see a lot of projects that are not being implemented. And you see a lot of resources going to private consultancies for jobs that can be done by established government departments and institutions that are better equipped and more knowledgeable than many of these consulting agencies. And therefore, it is the responsibility of this Parliament, and it's important that this committee has brought these ills to our attention, that we take it very seriously and we give them all the support that they require. And this particular committee should not rest on its laurels and say, we have done our job, we have submitted our report. They should follow it up consistently and regularly to make sure that, in fact, change comes to these institutions. Otherwise, Mr. Speaker, we'll continue to be wasting taxpayers' money. We'll continue to see corruption everywhere. For example, I'm in the National Cohesion and Equal Opportunities Committee. Every state corporation is in violation of the Constitution on the issues of equity, equality, and equal opportunities. Even the organizations that were established after the 2010 Constitution are violators. They are serial violators. They continue to have a large number of a small section of our communities. They continue not to employ people with disabilities. They continue to have gender disparity. These things are not acceptable because our Constitution specifically speaks out very clearly on the need for equal opportunity. And somehow these institutions seem to think that they're immune and there would be no punishment. This carefree attitude is a culture that is well spread in many of the national institutions that we have in our country that have come to this committee to present their reports. So therefore, Mr. Speaker, I would like to support this particular report and encourage the work of this particular committee. We should make sure, or commit this particular committee, and we must make sure that we punish the violators. We take action against institutions that are violating the Constitution, and we use our money prudently so that our country can take the necessary steps and develop and prosper. Thank you so much, and I support the report.
Honorable members, before I give the next speaker, allow me to acknowledge the following schools in the public gallery: Makanyanga Secondary School, Chuka Igambangombe, Tharaka Nithi; Maryland Primary School from Mgwen, Nandi; Kaptirion Secondary School from Baringo Central, Baringo. Meli, you can take the opportunity to welcome the students as you go to your contribution.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I also want to join the queue with other members in welcoming the students to the House to check on the proceedings. I know this is part of learning, and as Chair of Education, I want to commend the schools, the students, and the teachers for taking time out to come and show the students how Parliament works, and this is part of the civics or part of history and government. Honorable Speaker, I rise to, first of all, commend the Chair of PIC, Governance and Education, and more specifically, Honorable Speaker, the wisdom of the House in splitting Public Investment Committee. In last Parliament, Honorable Speaker, it was quite tedious, it was quite voluminous, that this House could not oversight a number of government agencies because of the volume of work. I want to commend you, Honorable Speaker, and the leadership of the House, more specifically on the splitting of PIC into various governance bodies: energy, education, and the likes. Honorable Speaker, as a Chair of Education, I want to commend the Chair of PIC, Governance and Education. If you look at the issues that he has raised, it is quite commendable. That one, a number of government institutions or parastatals are actually not following, especially the PFM Act. And as the Majority Whip has just put it, it is not in order. And this government does not support inept officers, officers who are not going to follow government procedures. And His Excellency the President has rightly put it, that he wants a government that delivers. He wants a government that holds officers to account. Yes. Let's take, for example, the Kenya National Examination Council building. It was started way back in 1986. Yes. Majority of the members of parliament who are here were not yet born. And up to today, it is not yet complete. This speaks about corruption, ineptitude, and in fact, all the CEOs that have served in the Kenya National Examination Council all through have not been able to complete. We want actually this House to hold those officers to account. We give them funds, and they have to give timelines on when to complete those particular structures. Honorable Speaker, public works is a government agency that always has actually been going to bed with many of these officers. Every other time, a building which is supposed to cost 500 million has been varied, and it is now about 3 or 4 billion. If you go to KICD, if you go to Examination Council, if you check even in the state universities, this is a very big problem. And I want to ask the Committee on Public Accounts, Public Investment, Education and Governance, to really go down. As a chair of education, we allocate resources. We want value for those resources. A building that was established, I want to pick a case in Moi University, where we have a building that is what is called a science complex that was what was started way back in 1990s. Up to today, it is not yet complete. If you go there, Honorable Speaker, you'll realize it has costed the taxpayer over 200 million, but nothing to show. That is one amongst many other public universities. And I want to ask the chair that we really need to move with speed to make sure that there is the mwananchi that voted, that is going to pay taxes, is going to smile all the way to these public institutions, saying, surely, this is the government that I voted for. This is the government that I wanted to be in place. So officers are supposed to be held to account. They are supposed to be responsible. And in fact, where an officer has failed to give documents to show how he has used the funds, and even the ethnicity, the gender, this is one country, one nation, one people. These people are supposed to be employed across board. And I think the president has been in the forefront on this, to make this country a tribeless nation. A nation where you don't get to know who is so-and-so who is the CEO. You need to have the services of that particular individual. Lastly, Honorable Speaker, on the issue of consultancies, this is where lots of funds have been lost, where you get institutions such as universities, for example, seeking outside consultancies, yet they themselves are actually having technical officers. It defeats logic that you get a university consulting with individuals outside at maybe a rate of 3 or 4 times, yet they have better consultants within the institution, which they would have actually cut the cost. So, Honorable Speaker, I'll rise to support and say that we really need to do more on this to make sure that there is value for money. We make sure that the resources that the government has put in place, actually the citizens are going to enjoy. And I want to ask that, Honorable Mambonga, you've done a good job, and this is the best job you can do, not actually going to the streets and throwing stones, but you can actually critique the government like that. Thank you so much.
Member for Westlands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for also giving me a chance to speak on this report. And first, I want to congratulate the committee for having gone through the reports for the financial years up to 2020, 21, I think. Mr. Speaker, listening to the chair as he was moving the report, it just explains public wastage. Wastage in public service and all that, Mr. Speaker. How can a building be constructed for over 30 years, one building in one institution, and there are many others, white elephants in ministries and everywhere? We need to look why are we still pumping money in such institutions, and we still find that every year, every financial year, there's money allocated to such functions. We need to examine this and audit these corporates, state corporates, to make sure that the funds, the taxpayers' money does not go to waste. Second, Mr. Speaker, the face of Kenya in state corporates, we find that most state corporates, if they're headed by a person from a particular community, staff will be from that particular community mostly. And also, people with disability, we have seen appointment after appointment, and we are not seeing people with disability being given a consideration. Yet the law is there, the law is clear. The law says about 5% of public service should be reserved for people with disability. And we hope that going forward, we shall find a better way of placement. I remember a friend of mine, Mr. Speaker, who had applied for a job in one of state corporates, and when he arrived with proper qualification and everything, and he was told that this job was not for people like you. So he demanded to know why, and he brought the case to me, and I approached the minister then, Mr. Speaker, and the minister ordered the committee to interview the man, and he was given the job. So we feel that these public corporates, they should be responsible enough. The people who are appointed to those positions and are given public funds, they should make proper usage of the funds so that they are accountable, and they must always account with. It doesn't matter who you are. Once you are in that position, managing public funds, you must be responsible enough and be accountable for every cent that is given to that institution. Otherwise, they must face the music. Anyone who has squandered the funds or used the funds properly, not properly, they must be, Mr. Speaker, taken to book to account. I also want to encourage the committee that they must come up with recommendations that can put sanctions on some of those people who are taking, who are employing corruption in these public state function corporates, Mr. Speaker. Otherwise, I want to say that I support the report, and I'm just worried about how the funds are being used, especially if one institution can take over 30 years. 30 years. We just want to know how much money has been sunk in such an institution. Mr. Speaker, thank you.
Francis Segei.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to also ventilate on this very important report. Mr. Speaker, I am a member of this committee. And I want on the onset, Mr. Speaker, to thank our chairman, who has presented the report very well. And Mr. Speaker, I want to commend the chairman, particularly on the way he interrogates on issues when we are in the committee. And Mr. Speaker, I want to report here also that last week we had one of the institutions which came to us, and we are making some serious legal action. We are almost arresting that person. But Mr. Speaker, we had to follow the law because things in these institutions are going haywire. Mr. Speaker, the universities are dying. And Mr. Speaker, the audit reports which we have received in these universities are terrible. And Mr. Speaker, I thank this committee because we have moved and we have been going to the regional offices to interrogate on these people. In fact, we went to Central Province, Mr. Speaker, and the vice chancellors and leaders of those TVET institutions were unable to report because they were not ready. So, Mr. Speaker, we have a lot of problems. First of all, audit reports are very far behind, and we would like to ask the government to really assist this committee so that it can move forward and make some issues known. Ethnicity. Ethnicity, Mr. Speaker, is like cancer. We saw in many institutions, from the top to the lowest staff, are from one ethnic group. And Mr. Speaker, we must now move forward and look at these issues, because how can we have one Kenya, when an institution is only employing one tribe? So we are very serious as a committee. And Mr. Speaker, what we realized in these institutions is that these people who are leading, the vice chancellors and the managers of these institutions, are either incompetent or they are corrupt. Mr. Speaker, we found one area which is the area of variation in the construction of buildings in this place. We found one institution had to make a variation of 146 million. And we were shocked. And Mr. Speaker, we are moving as a committee, we are making serious recommendations. And very soon, if this House can implement those recommendations, we'll see our institution changing in future. One other thing which we also discussed and which the chairman has simply mentioned is the issue of funding private universities. This committee is the one which brought this issue out, and now the government has taken action to stop funding of private universities from public. And we are very sure, Mr. Speaker, that very soon our public universities will enroll many students, because now the people who are poor can be able to take their children there. Mr. Speaker, I also want to talk about public works. Public works, Mr. Speaker, is a government institution, but it's a problem, because people have now gone to the consultants, because what we have seen in public works is the issue of variation, and which people are making money, minting money in these institutions. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I want to also to talk about the land problem which we saw in these universities. In fact, in one of the institutions in Nairobi here, the land which belongs to the institution has been grabbed by individuals. And Mr. Speaker, I want to assure you that with the chairman in the seat and the able members, we have serious members in that committee, and we have resolved that we are going to make these people uncomfortable in wherever they are. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to support this report and tell you that we, as a committee, we are moving forward, and we are going to have people taken to court in no distant future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support the report.
Thank you, Honorable Sigai. Makali Mulu.
Yeah, thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, let me also join my colleagues in really thanking the committee led by Honorable Kwamboka for this good report, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I think this is the first report we are getting from the peak committees, and it's the first report coming from the side of the opposition in terms of oversight committees, other than the ones we have been doing for public debt and privatization. So we really want to appreciate the work of the committee. And Honorable Speaker, listening to the report, the presentation of the report, and listening to the immediate speaker, in terms of what they think as a committee and what is written here, Honorable Speaker, I think the committee has been very lenient in terms of recommendations. Actually, Honorable Sigei, what you are saying, I wish it was in the report, where you are saying you want to act very tough, but the report seems to be very lenient in terms of recommendations. And Honorable Speaker, this being an oversight report, it is important that we start cracking the whip. Honorable Speaker, when you look at some of the general observations in terms of what is happening in these sagas, and more so sagas in the education sector and governance sector, Honorable Speaker, you note that these are sagas which are doing what you call social activities in the country. Actually, education is is more of a public good, so we don't expect these sagas to give us dividends at the end of the year because they are supporting social activities, but we expect them to operate within the law. For example, Honorable Speaker, when in this house, in the 21st century, we hear that the first observation is all these sagas which were audited, there was an observation of poor accounting standards. Poor accounting standards, Honorable Speaker. When this country has the best brains in terms of accounting profession, Honorable Speaker, and second to that, Honorable Speaker, accounting is one of the areas where, or the disciplines where, things have been standardized. So this can only be explained by two things, Honorable Speaker. The first one is a situation where the CEOs deliberately decide not to prepare their accounts. The second one is tied to one of the recommendations of the Speaker, where instead of hiring competent people, they end up hiring relatives who might not be having the right papers, Honorable Speaker. And on that note, Honorable Speaker, I would have expected the committee to come up with a very clear recommendation saying that such as CEOs who could not do proper accounting, Honorable Speaker, are not worthy being CEOs in this country in the 21st century. The second area, Honorable Speaker, is the area of delayed submission of accounting documents, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, anytime we interact with the Auditor General, there has been a strong feeling that even the 3 months allowed in law, that after 3 months after the end of the financial year, the accounting officer should be able to submit their document to the Auditor General. There is a strong feeling, Honorable Speaker, that this should be reduced to 2 months. Why is that the case? This is the case because these accountants, Honorable Speaker, and every ministry and these sagas have accountants who are qualified, keep on preparing these documents throughout the year. So by close of the financial year, there is no good reason why they require 3 months to consolidate their accounts. 2 months should be enough so that we allow the Auditor General more time to prepare the accounts. So, Honorable Speaker, when you look at some of these observations, I think this committee, for now, this being the first report, we can understand. But I think as we move to the future, Honorable Speaker, and all other reports which are going to come from this oversight committees, Honorable Speaker, we need to be very firm as a House in terms of what we are recommending, so that we send the right signal to these accounting officers who think they can play around with the resources from the public and do whatever they want to do. And Honorable Speaker, more specifically, when this country is struggling now to even meet the basic requirements of a country, Honorable Speaker, this is the time we must make sure that every single cent is actually going to the intended place, Honorable Speaker. The other thing, Honorable Speaker, which is coming out is the issue of these consultancies, Honorable Speaker, that consultancies are costing more than the actual cost of the project. You know, you can't, and some of us who have background in program management, you can't understand where a consultant becomes more expensive than the cost of the project itself. You can't explain, Honorable Speaker. So to me, I think these are cases where those who are involved in such a case should be finding their way either to the courts or should be investigated by the investigating bodies like EACC and other bodies like the DCI, so that we get to know really what is happening, Honorable Speaker. So, Honorable Speaker, as I conclude, I want to say the following, Honorable Speaker, that the issue of skilled employment in this parastatus, Honorable Speaker, is very common. Actually, Honorable Speaker, you will not be surprised to find some of them in their senior meetings. They can actually conduct meetings in their vernacular, because you find everybody in those senior positions comes from the same ethnic grouping, Honorable Speaker. When this country, we say we have 45 different ethnic groupings, Honorable Speaker. And we also keep on saying our constitution demands that there should be regional balancing. So, Honorable Speaker, to me, these are issues which are really issues which are very important and we should be discussed by this House, so that as a House, Honorable Speaker, we don't become a lamenting House where we are only full of lamentations every day. This is not working, and we appear like we are a toothless dog, Honorable Speaker. I think this House has what it takes to act on some of these officers to make things sure that things are being done correctly. And I'm happy when I hear the majority whip saying he is ready to crack the whip so long as the report recommends so. So it is our work as a minority side to make sure that we make these recommendations. Honorable Speaker, as I conclude, I want to say this. Even as a House, Honorable Speaker, we have a big role to play. And I always believe, Honorable Speaker, these audit reports will be taken seriously in this country. The time will start tying audit reports to budgeting process. So that, Honorable Speaker, if any CEO or even accounting officer has audit queries, we make sure that the budget is reduced to a level that they must answer those audit queries before we give them more money. So if we tie these two reports, audit report and budget making process, Honorable Speaker, this House will become more effective in terms of doing our work. And this can only be done, Honorable Speaker, if we also ensure that in terms of timing, like now this report is up to 2021 financial year, Honorable Speaker. But, Honorable Speaker, we have 2021/2022, we have 2022/2023,
And very soon we'll be having 2023-24. So you can see we still have arrears of about 2 years. So if you really want to tie budgeting with auditing, we must make sure that the auditing reports, Honorable Speaker, are in this House in a timely manner, and this House makes resolutions in a way that this can inform the budget process, Honorable Speaker. With this matter remarks, Honorable Speaker, I support the report. Thank you.
Geoffrey Ruku.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support this report and to congratulate my friend Wamboka for a very good job well done through his committee. Mr. Speaker, the university education is a very key aspect of this country. Our nation spends a lot of money to education, whether it is basic education, secondary education, as well as university education. And we have experienced senior members of our government, well, in the previous government, trying to construct policies which they favor private individuals. And that is actually an economic crime, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we realize we have Anti-Corruption Authority, we call it Anti-Corruption and Economic Crime Act. But it is rarely that we see economic crimes being prosecuted in our courts. Because there's no way we can get taxpayers' money and we channel that money to private entities, and those private entities are not sharing the profits with the public. We have seen private universities getting huge amount of money, and it's because there is serious collusion in the Ministry of Education, where we have senior Ministry of Education officials who have been pocketed by the people who own private universities in our nation. We have to say this in a day broad right, Mr. Speaker. And those senior people who have been pocketed in the Ministry of Education, they are known. And those who private owners of universities, they are known. So it is a very good way of doing business using public money. You come up with a private university, you go to a government entity, get public money, and use that money to do business in a private university. Mr. Speaker, this is something which cannot be around in our nation. It is either you do business using public money and that the profit you make, you remit that profit to the public as well. This has happened, and we should condemn that with the strongest terms possible. And those who are at the Ministry of Education, who have run down our higher education system, they should be called and serious action be taken. I would even request the committee, the chair of the committee, to go further and recommend with clarity the people who are engaged in this kind of activities. We cannot. Our public universities have been going down because we cannot be able to finance them. More University, Egerton University, University of Nairobi, and other many universities. But we have money to channel in private institutions owned by private people. It is a disgrace which should be condemned, Mr. Speaker. As well as when it comes to the CEOs of our public entities, they have to make value for money, whether it is in all industries we have, to ensure the common man benefits from the activities of the government. This has to change, Mr. Speaker. And I know Kenya Kwanza government, Mr. Speaker, it is not in business of protecting anybody who is not towing the line, who is not doing justice to the public. So if the opposition, I see the opposition has been able to see the right at the end of the day, that is what you are supposed to do. Please continue with what you are doing, and we will support you, even if we are in this side of the house, because Kenyans have to get value of what the government is implementing using with those remarks. I support this report and recommend further investigations to be done by this committee so that we can have a concrete way forward, so that we can change the culture. This nation can be able to change within a span of 10 years, and we will be a nation like many other nations in the world which are undeveloped. But we have condoned bad practices again and again. It has to stop, and that is the work of this side of the House, and we will support you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Give me Honorable Dr. James Nyikal. But Honorable Nyikal, before you have the mic, I would like to recognize the following schools in the public gallery. And some Pioneer Primary School from Bomet East constituency, Bomet County. Holy Rosary Girls, Ortum, Pokot South constituency in West Pokot County, and Juri High School, Chuka Igamangombe constituency in Tarakaniti County. On my own behalf and on behalf of the Speaker of National Assembly, you are welcome to observe the proceedings in the House. Honorable Dr. Nyikal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity.
Order, Honorable Doris Donya. Honorable Doris Donya, I know the uniform of Tabaka School.
You can see there are many in the gallery.
I can assure
pink
you.
Pink and blue.
I've not yet seen them. Immediately I recognize them.
They were actually being shown at the screen in pink and blue.
So there is no problem. No. They are behind me.
They are behind you.
I will recognize them. I will recognize them, and I will welcome them to the House. Don't worry, Honorable Doris Donya.
Will I say something before they go home? Let me do it because they are there. You know, Mr. Speaker, a girl's school.
After I recognize them, you will. I know that is your school, Honorable Doris Donya. And the girls would want to see you sit in the place they'll sit on in future. Honorable Dr. Nyikal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this report. And I must start by appreciating the wisdom of splitting the investment committee into the three committees, one of which is looking at the sagas under the Ministry of Education. And Mr. Speaker, may I also take this opportunity to appreciate the work that has been done by this committee. Mr. Speaker, these are sagas that for a long time we have never discussed them on the floor of this House. We don't seem to have recognized how important they are. But Mr. Speaker, if you look at these institutions, all our efforts in education will go to nothing if we do not strengthen these institutions. Mr. Speaker, look at the Kenya Institute for Curriculum Development. It does not matter how much money we put in education, if the curriculum development and curriculum implementation and monitoring is not done properly, it will come to none. And who can do that other than the Institute for Curriculum Development? Mr. Speaker, look at NACOSTI, the National Commission for Science, Technology and Innovation. We are putting a lot of emphasis on STEM now. We are putting a lot of emphasis on a competence-based curriculum. But Mr. Speaker, without research that NACOSTI is leading in, all this will be of no value. Without harnessing science and technology, we are not really going anywhere, even with the new curriculum. Mr. Speaker, look at the Council for Legal Education. You are a lawyer. Without this council, Mr. Speaker, we cannot have advocates in this country practicing as they should. And Mr. Speaker, look at the TVET authority. We are all emphasizing the issue of TVETs. And we have this authority that is actually to guide us on how we should develop them, how we should relate them to our industries. And it is this authority that will do that. And we've never really discussed them here. Look at for Commission for University Education. Mr. Speaker, how will you have university education? You have universities, we say some are dying, but we never talk about Commission for University Education. It never comes before us. even during the budget, you never really hear much of them. Mr. Speaker, look at COOPs. That is the Kenya Universities and Colleges Central Placement Services. We are just through the process of actually placing students in universities and colleges, and it has brought out a lot of problems on how to place students in which institutions. That is an extremely important institution. You can look at the Kenya National Examination Council. Mr. Speaker, if we are not looking at Kenya National Examination Council, if we do not support it, if we do not make sure that it can actually oversight and give credible results, look at what happened before the Matiang'i Magoha process, which actually told us that a large number of the students that were assumed to have passed, that had A's, actually had fake A's. And with that realization, when they actually streamlined, the number of students that qualified for university education went down until we have to reduce colleges. And that is why we started private colleges, which are now competing because we are now getting the correct students with the correct number of colleges. So, Mr. Speaker, these are important. Look at Higher Education Loans Board. Mr. Speaker, we have all been saying that we are spending more money in private universities instead of public universities. We had fake students and a large number for universities. Now when we have properly tested students, we have fewer students. And so there's competition between the public universities and private universities. And so we now know we have to put more money in our public universities. So, Mr. Speaker, these institutions are extremely important. Look at the university enterprise institutions like UNES. Universities must be able to actually take part in some commercial activities, even as part of their training. And if they cannot do that, Mr. Speaker, we really have to support them. So, Mr. Speaker, if you look at this, and there are actually 23 of them, I've only mentioned about 10. And these are institutions that before this committee was in place, the division of the Invest Committee into 3, we never heard about them. Even when we are vetting people, we never hear people coming, their names coming here for vetting. Maybe they come, we don't show interest. And yet, they are key in our educational development and actually the economy of the country, if you look at this institution. And Mr. Speaker, look at the report we are getting about them. Poor accounting standards. And we are told that sometimes when this committee was going, they were not even able to report, which means these people have not been oversighted at all. They have actually been never supervised. And we are told, Mr. Speaker, that most of their institutions are just one ethnic group depending on where they are. Obviously, if there is no oversight, proper oversight, the CEOs will actually employ people around and see it as an entity which they can use. Mr. Speaker, we are told that the accounting officers are ignorant of the Public Finance Management Act. How can we have such important institutions run by people who are ignorant? And how did they get those jobs? Again, it is our vetting. So that we have not put emphasis on these institutions. The committee has recommended training, but I think we should also look at the process of recruiting these officers. We have been told that they are not even sure of when compliance with the PFMA timelines. They don't know when to report, do accounting reports. Mr. Speaker, this is speaking volumes. That the institutions they have, they don't even know about the aligned titles for those institutions. And Mr. Speaker, if you look what comes out, is actually to an extent we have neglected these institutions. And I think this committee has done a good job. Now we are